When it comes to rock and roll, few figures loom as large as Mick Jagger. As the swaggering frontman of the Rolling Stones for over 6 decades, he has seen generations of artists rise, fall, reinvent themselves, and disappear. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Jagger has never shied away from speaking his mind. Whether in interviews, backstage conversations, or public appearances, he often delivers sharp, witty, and sometimes cutting critiques of fellow music icons. For fans, these moments are gold, because they show us how one of the most influential rock stars of all time truly feels about his peers and rivals. This piece explores Jagger's candid takes on fellow legends, ranging from admiration to brutal honesty. From the Beatles to David Bowie, from Elvis Presley to modern pop stars, Mick Jagger's critiques reveal his competitive spirit, his humor, and his unshakable confidence. Perhaps the most famous comparison in rock history is between the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. Both bands dominated the 1960s, shaping not only the sound, but also the culture of the era. And while Jagger has often praised the Fab Four, he's also given blunt critiques. Jagger once admitted that the Beatles were a pop band that grew into something else, while the Stones were always built on rhythm and blues. He admired their songwriting, particularly Lennon and McCartney's partnership, but he also joked that the Stones were always the edgier act. In a 1960s interview, he famously quipped, "They need us, and we need them. They make the pretty music, we make the nasty music." But Jagger didn't spare them criticism. He often called the Beatles a studio band after they stopped touring in 1966, while proudly pointing out that the Rolling Stones continued to thrive as live performers. Even in later years, he cheekily downplayed their influence. The Beatles were great, but they were of their time. We've kept going. Elvis Presley was already a global phenomenon when the Rolling Stones were just starting out. Jagger grew up idolizing Elvis but never hid his critical side. He admired the raw energy of the early Elvis records, but found Presley's later career disappointing. In one interview, Jagger noted, "Elvis had it all in the beginning, the look, the voice, the sex, but he lost touch with the music. By the end, it was all Vegas, no danger." This critique reveals Jagger's philosophy, that a rock star must always stay dangerous, unpredictable, and connected to the roots of their music. For Jagger, Elvis became too safe, too commercial, and too controlled. Still, he respected Presley's cultural impact, admitting that without Elvis, the Stones may have never existed. Mick Jagger and David Bowie shared one of rock's most fascinating relationships. They collaborated on the hit Dancing in the Street, partied together through the 1970s, and were often linked in the press for their flamboyant styles. Yet behind the scenes, Jagger had strong opinions about Bowie. Jagger praised Bowie's innovation, calling him a chameleon who always reinvented himself, but he also mocked his more theatrical tendencies. "David loved to play characters. I never did that. I just played myself." Jagger sometimes implied that Bowie's constant reinvention was a cover for insecurity, while he prided himself on authenticity. Still, Jagger admitted Bowie pushed him to be more adventurous. Their rivalry was partly playful, partly real. In private conversations, Jagger sometimes dismissed Bowie's music as too artsy or overproduced. Yet when Bowie died in 2016, Jagger's tribute revealed deep respect. David was always an inspiration and a true original. If there's one artist Jagger consistently respected, it's Bob Dylan. The Stones were influenced by Dylan's songwriting in the 1960s, and Jagger has praised Dylan's lyrical genius. However, he also offered blunt critiques of Dylan's live performances. In one interview, Jagger chuckled, "Dylan can write the most brilliant songs, but sometimes you don't know what he's singing on stage. He mumbles through it all." Jagger also criticized Dylan's tendency to rearrange his classics during concerts, saying fans often walked away confused. Still, he credited Dylan with elevating rock lyrics to a higher level, admitting that without Dylan, the Stones may have never dared to write songs like Sympathy for the Devil. The Rolling Stones and the Doors both thrived on danger, sexuality, and rebellion, yet Jagger often seemed unimpressed by Jim Morrison. He acknowledged Morrison's charisma, but critiqued his excess. Jim Hay had presence, but he couldn't keep it together. "It's hard to watch someone burn out like that," Jagger once said. He admired Morrison's poetry, but believed the Doors lacked the musical tightness of the Stones. For Jagger, Morrison's downfall was a lesson that to survive in rock and roll, you needed discipline as much as talent. When Queen rose to fame in the 1970s, comparisons to the Stones were inevitable. Freddie Mercury's flamboyance, vocal power, and stage dominance made him a rival frontman in the rock pantheon. Jagger gave Freddie credit as a performer, calling him incredible at working a crowd. However, he occasionally jabbed at Queen's music. "They're very grand, very operatic. That's not my thing. I like it raw." Jagger's critique highlights the contrast between the Stones' gritty, blues-based rock and Queen's theatrical, layered productions. Yet even Jagger admitted Freddie was one of the few frontmen who could rival him in commanding an audience. As rock's elder statesman, Jagger hasn't hesitated to critique modern stars. He has praised some, like Lady Gaga, who performed with the Stones and earned Jagger's respect for her energy, but others haven't fared as well. He has been dismissive of certain pop acts, claiming, "A lot of today's stars don't play live enough. They rely too much on production and not enough on performance." When asked about rappers dominating the charts, Jagger noted their cultural importance, but suggested many lacked staying power. "Hip-hop has great energy, but longevity is rare. Let's see who's still around in 50 years, Jagger on his own bandmates. Interestingly, Jagger has critiqued even those closest to him, his fellow Stones. His long-running tensions with Keith Richards are legendary. Richards mocked Jagger's solo work, while Jagger countered that Keith sometimes lived too much in the past. Of drummer Charlie Watts, Jagger once said, "Charlie's not a flashy drummer, but he's the heartbeat. Still, he could drive you mad with his stubbornness." These comments, though critical, came from a place of respect. Jagger always believed in honesty, even when it stung. Why is Mick Jagger so openly critical of other music icons? Part of it is his personality. Jagger thrives on competition. He's driven to prove himself against others. By critiquing his peers, he sets the Stones apart and reinforces their identity. Another reason is longevity. Jagger knows the music world is littered with fallen idols. His critiques often highlight the mistakes others made, whether selling out, losing discipline, or failing to evolve. In his eyes, the Stones survived because they avoided those traps. Finally, there's honesty. Jagger has never pretended to be diplomatic. His critiques may be sharp, but they're also insightful. They reveal a man who loves music deeply, but who isn't afraid to puncture myths and legends. Today, at over 80 years old, Mick Jagger is still performing with the energy of a man half his age. His critiques of fellow icons remain part of his legend. They remind us that in rock and roll, ego and rivalry are inseparable from artistry.